I want to start today with an image. It's the very first thing you see in the source material we're covering.
It's pretty striking.
It is. It's a stark black background. On the left, you have a silhouette of a human head. On the right, the scales of justice. And right between them, in these bold red letters, it just says, "Why this conversation feels dangerous."
It's not exactly a subtle opening, is it? It feels almost like a warning label on a high-voltage box.
It really does. And honestly, reading through this text, it's called Discourse on Achievement by Lev Neymotin.
Yeah.
I felt that voltage. This is not a light read.
No.
It's a deep dive into a subject that, most of us instinctively try to avoid. You know that moment at a dinner party where the conversation drifts toward inequality or why some nations succeed and others struggle?
And suddenly everyone gets intensely interested in their salad.
The salad defense, yes.
That reaction is actually central to what we're talking about today. The text isn't just about the data or the arguments, it's about the emotional weight we attach to them before a single word is even spoken.
We're terrified of where the logic might lead us.
Exactly.
So before we even crack this open, I think we need to set some ground rules. The author actually does this, and I want to adopt them for our deep dive today. Our mission is clarity, not completeness.
I think that's vital.
Right.
We are not going to resolve the nature versus nurture debate in the next 15 minutes.
God, no.
That would be arrogant, and it's impossible. The goal here, like the source says, is to just explore an honest attempt to think through a really difficult question.
Without falling into slogans.
Yeah.
And the core tension, the thing that makes this so sweaty palms inducing, is that modern societies are trying to hold two massive principles at the same time.
And they feel like they're crashing into each other.
They really do.
It's a collision of values.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you have the pursuit of truth through open inquiry, the scientific ideal that says we should be able to ask any question.
Right. Follow the data wherever it leads.
No matter how uncomfortable. And that's the head from the image. But on the other hand, you've got the scales. You have this deep, foundational moral commitment to equality and human dignity. The belief that all people are of equal worth.
And the author's point is that when those two things seem to collide, when the inquiry suggests outcomes aren't equal, we just freeze.
We retreat into silence. Or, as the author argues, we retreat into confusion because silence doesn't actually produce fairness. So if you're feeling a little nervous listening to this, that's okay. That nervousness is the subject.
Okay, let's unpack this. The essay starts with a story. Two old friends, they're having a drink, bouncing from history to politics.
Just a normal conversation.
A normal Tuesday night. Until they hit a wall.
It's a very relatable scene, right? The conversation is flowing, and then one of them asks a question that just stops the music.
And the question was, why do some societies consistently produce more science, technology, stable institutions, and cultural output than others?
Now, on the surface, that sounds like a history question. You could talk about geography or trade routes.
Right, England had coal, something like that. So why did the conversation just stop?
Because the friend in the story didn't just disagree with the premise. He resisted the entire framing. He got stuck on one word.
Achievement.
Achievement. He felt that word was a disguised judgment. He asked, who defines achievement? Isn't that just you saying, our way is better?
He thought that by admitting a difference in achievement, he was admitting a difference in human worth.
Precisely. He was thinking, if I say Society A achieved more than Society B, am I saying the people in Society A are better human beings?
That is a huge distinction. It's not that he was denying facts, like the Industrial Revolution. He was denying the language because it felt like a hierarchy.
And that's the author's first major point. The discomfort isn't scientific, it's moral. We've lost the certainty that we can describe differences without implying a hierarchy of human worth.
And because of that fear, we stopped trying to describe reality.
But the reality of differing outcomes doesn't just disappear because we stop talking about it.
So if we're going to have this conversation, we have to, rescue the word achievement. Strip it of that moral baggage.
Exactly. We need a definition that is descriptive, not judgmental. And the source defines achievement as accumulated capability.
Accumulated capability. Okay, that sounds a lot more mechanical.
It is. It just refers to the capacity of a society to generate, organize, and transmit complexity over time.
Okay, transmit complexity. Translate that. We're not just talking about who has the fastest iPhones.
No, not at all. Though technology is part of it, it's much broader. It includes science, yes, but also law, literature, governance, institutional trust,
So the ability to build a court system that actually functions for 300 years is an achievement in this definition.
It is. It's the ability to impose order on entropy over generations. And here is maybe the most important line in this whole section. Explanation is not the same as judgment.
That feels like the bumper sticker for this entire deep dive.
It should be. Describing a society's output is not the same as assigning value to the individuals within it. You can say a system has low capability without saying the people in it are bad people.
But that's the trap, right? That's where our brains glitch. We see a chart, we see different outcomes, and we immediately jump to better person, worse person.
And that is the reflex the author is asking us to just suspend for a moment. Because once that confusion happens, any real analysis becomes impossible.
Which brings us to another word that gets thrown around, and it's usually where the shouting starts. Intelligence.
Right. And the author argues that the public debate makes a huge mistake here. We tend to compress all of these really complex societal outcomes into that one single, very loaded word.
Like IQ is the only thing that matters.
But the text says that's way too simple. I mean, no society runs on raw brain power alone.
You can have a room full of geniuses, but if they can't work together, you don't get a civilization. You just get a really argumentative Twitter thread.
Exactly. The author uses a metaphor here that I find really helpful. The toolbox.
The toolbox. Okay, walk us through that.
So imagine a carpenter's toolbox. A hammer isn't better than a screwdriver. They just do different things. It's not a hierarchy.
Yeah.
The author argues that long-term societal success relies on a whole combination of traits. Yes, cognitive ability is in there, but so is discipline, cooperation, impulse control.
Impulse control and long-term planning really stood out to me.
Yeah.
That's the ability to plant a tree that you yourself won't ever sit under.
Or just the willingness to follow shared rules even when they're inconvenient. That's trust. That's social capital. If you have a society of high IQ people who all cheat on their taxes, you don't get achievement, you get chaos.
So the toolbox is about the whole mix of traits.
Right. It's about how those traits are distributed across a population. And that shifts the focus from judging an individual to trying to understand a system.
Okay, so we've defined achievement as capability.
Yeah.
We've got our toolbox of traits. Now we have to look at where those traits come from.
Yeah.
And this is where the friend in the story wanted to stop the car.
This is the pivot. In the story, the friend argues for the standard explanation. Environment.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Education, upbringing, access to institutions, historical injustice.
Of course.
If you grow up in a place with great schools and stable banks, you're likely to do better.
And the author agrees. He explicitly says these are powerful forces, but, and here's the big but, he finds it incomplete.
Why? If environment explains it, why keep digging?
Because of the feedback loop. Good environments don't just fall from the sky. Strong institutions, schools, courts, markets, they're products of prior conditions.
They're built by people.
Maintained by people who have those toolbox traits we just talked about. Achievement produces environments that then reinforce more achievement.
So the hard question the author asks is, if the environment explains the outcomes, what explains the environment?
Who built the schools?
Yeah.
Who maintained the courts? And this leads us to the author's most provocative stance. And we need to be really clear here. We are just reporting on the text's argument.
Yeah.
The author posits that underlying human distributions, which are shaped by biology, play a dominant role in these long-term differences.
The genetic question.
The genetic question. He suggests that while environment is an amplifier or a suppressor, the raw material, the distribution of those traits in the toolbox, might not be identical across every population group.
And again, just reporting here, the author's not saying genes dictate your life.
No, absolutely not, and that's a vital distinction. He says genes do not dictate outcomes for individuals. Individuals defy averages all the time. This is an argument about probability and large numbers.
This is where the math comes in, the shape of the curve. And I found this part fascinating because it explains how small things can become very big things.
It's all about the tails of the curve.
Right, so let's slow down here. Explain the tails concept.
Sure. Think of a bell curve. Most people are in the middle, average height, average patience, whatever. That's the big hump of the bell. But complex societies often depend disproportionately on the people at the extremes, the tails of the curve. The people who are incredibly good at engineering or organizing or innovating.
The outliers.
Yeah.
The top 1%, the top 5% of engineers who keep the power grid running.
Exactly. Now, here is the statistical reality. You only need a very small shift in the average of a group to produce massive differences at those tails.
Can you give us an example?
Okay, imagine two groups. Group A's average height is 5'9". Group B's is 5'10", just 1 inch. To the naked eye, they'd look about the same.
Right, 1 inch is basically noise.
But if you started looking for people over 7 feet tall, the extreme tail Group B might have 10 times as many as Group A. That tiny shift in the middle explodes at the edges.
I see. So the author's hypothesis is that if societal achievement relies on those extreme outliers, a tiny difference in the average distribution of a trait could mean one society has, say, 1,000 of those people and another has 10.
Over centuries, yes, that's the idea. Small statistical differences could accumulate into really meaningful differences in what a society produces.
And just to be clear, the author admits this isn't settled science.
Not at all. He calls it an explanatory framework, not a final conclusion. He knows it's heavily debated, but he finds the statistical logic compelling as a possible mechanism.
Okay, so that's the argument.
Okay.
And naturally, that is the argument that makes the friend in the story, and probably a lot of listeners, want to hit the brakes. Why did he resist this so hard?
Well, the author acknowledges that the resistance is legitimate. It's fear. And history gives us plenty of reasons for that fear.
We're talking about the 20th century, eugenics, racism.
Absolutely. Claims of biological difference have been used to justify some of the worst things humans have ever done to each other.
So the friend in the essay wants to protect society from those conclusions. He feels if we open that door to biological explanations, we're opening the door to cruelty.
And that instinct to avoid the language is protective. It comes from a good place.
But the author has a counter-argument. He says, protection comes at a cost.
The cost is truth. And maybe paradoxically, the cost is also nuance. He argues that if we forbid the explanation, if we say you cannot talk about this, the phenomenon doesn't go away.
The differences in outcomes are still there. We just aren't allowed to ask why.
And if responsible people aren't allowed to discuss it, who is left having the conversation?
The irresponsible people.
Right. The conversation moves to places where nuance is lost and where hatred actually does fester. So you have a standoff. The friend wants to protect society from harmful conclusions. The author wants to protect inquiry from prohibition.
That is a heavy standoff. Safety on one side, free inquiry on the other.
And the author suggests we need a new kind of boundary. Not a boundary on what we can ask, but a boundary on how we apply the answers.
This brings us to the only workable boundary section. I think this is probably the most hopeful part of this whole deep dive.
It is. The core principle he offers is this. Aggregate differences, even if demonstrated, do not determine individual worth.
We need to unpack that. Averages describe populations. They do not define persons.
That is the mantra. That has to be it.
Right.
If you meet a person, statistics about their demographic group tell you absolutely nothing meaningful about their character, their capability, or their dignity as a human being.
Because of the overlap between the curves we talked about.
Exactly. Even if one group has a higher average, any randomer person from another group might be smarter, faster, more capable. Averages are not destinies.
For the goal isn't to prove the genetic hypothesis is 100% right. The goal is to make sure we can even have the conversation.
Without tearing each other apart, yes. If we retreat into slogans just shouting environment or genetics, we lose intellectual honesty. But if we let explanation turn into hierarchy,
If we say, because this group has a higher average, they are better people,
then we lose our humanity.
it feels like walking a tightrope.
It is a tightrope. But the author argues it's the only path forward. We have to be mature enough to handle data without losing our moral compass. We have to separate the scientific question of why do things happen from the moral question of how should we treat each other.
And the answer to how should we treat each other is always.
With dignity, regardless of the data. Full stop.
So where does this leave us? We've looked at a text that asks us to just suspend judgment for a while. We've talked about the toolbox, the bell curves, the fear of history.
And importantly, we haven't resolved the debate. We didn't solve nature versus nurture today.
Not the goal. But the takeaway isn't about who wins that debate.
No. The ultimate point of the source is that the willingness to think carefully about uncomfortable subjects matters more than any specific conclusion we reach.
When we stop being able to talk, when we silence inquiry because we're afraid of where it might go, we lose something vital.
We lose the ability to understand the world as it actually is. And we lose the ability to fix it. You can't fix a system if you're not allowed to look at the blueprints because they make you uncomfortable.
It's a challenge, really. A challenge to the listener, to us. Can we handle the discomfort of the dangerous conversation?
That is the question.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something from the very end of the essay. It's a warning. When the ability to have the conversation disappears, both truth and compassion become casualties.
That's the danger.
So here's the provocative thought for you to carry into your day. We usually think of truth and dignity as being on the same team. But what do you do when they feel like enemies? Can you hold the pursuit of a cold, hard explanation in one hand and the preservation of warm human dignity in the other at the exact same time?
It's not easy, but it just might be necessary.
Thanks for taking the dive with us today. This was a heavy one, but an important one. We'll see you next time.